was a great movie, but
Yeah.
it seemed like there was resistance to that movie.
Especially with something like The Passion that I did, the written word was very important because it was,
Especially with something like What the Passion That I Did, the written word was very important because it was, imagine a film watched by millions, talked about for years, yet its deepest message stayed hidden from people's eyes. On January 9, 2025, Mel Gibson sat down with Joe Rogan and said something that shocked everyone. He revealed that for the past 20 years, people have been missing a very big point about his most controversial film, The Passion of the Christ. What he shared in that conversation didn't just surprise Joe Rogan. It left millions of people stunned. People thought they had fully understood the film, but in reality, they hadn't. Gibson clearly said that when he was making this film, his goal was to show that this story is not just about one man. It's about all of us. His sacrifice was for all humanity. And in some way, we are all a part of the reason behind it. Alright, what's interesting is that The Passion of the Christ earned over $612 million worldwide, even though it was shot in ancient, nearly dead languages. Big Hollywood studios had refused to make this film. Still, for 20 years, people believed they understood its story. But the real truth was something else. And when on January 9, 2025, Gibson revealed this truth in front of Joe Rogan, it felt like the hidden meaning behind the film finally came to light for the first time. If you enjoy hidden truths and interesting stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. For nearly 2 decades, the real message stayed buried somewhere. People remained caught up in the film's violence, controversies, accusations of anti-Semitism, and even strange incidents during shooting, like lightning striking the set. But in all this, the true message was left behind, even though it was present in every single scene. This wasn't an accident. It was placed there intentionally by a filmmaker who had spent years preparing, sitting with priests and religious scholars even before the camera started rolling. Most people walked out of the film deeply shaken, but honestly, very few truly understood what they had actually seen. That night, when Mel Gibson spoke openly with Joe Rogan, the entire picture changed. The Passion of the Christ is not just the story of a film. It's one of the most unique and astonishing stories in the history of cinema. And if you really want to understand what people have been missing all these years, you have to look at the story from the beginning. And it doesn't start at the crucifixion. Alright, it begins with a man breaking from the inside. By the late 1990s, Mel Gibson was counted among the biggest names in Hollywood. His film Braveheart won 5 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Money, fame, success, he had everything. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But on the inside, he was falling apart. He has admitted it himself and even said it during his conversation with Joe Rogan that during that phase, he was struggling with emptiness, alcohol addiction, and deep inner restlessness. The glamour of Hollywood wasn't fixing him. It was making things worse. Mel Gibson had clearly said, "I have flaws. That's no secret." He admitted that alcohol and substance use had completely taken hold of him, and it felt like nothing could stop it. But then there came a moment when he asked for help from a power greater than himself. And that became the turning point in his life. From there, a completely different kind of passion grew inside him. He began studying the final 12 hours of Jesus Christ with incredible depth, almost like a detective trying to solve an ancient mystery. He spoke with theologians, did extensive research, and tried to understand every small detail so that what he showed wouldn't feel like just a story, but a real experience. Gibson didn't just understand the story on the surface. He read all 4 Gospels in their original languages, line by line. During this time, he came across a book that completely changed the direction of the film, The Dolorous Passion of Our Lord Jesus Christ. And this book was based on the mystical visions of Catherine Emmerich, a German nun who lived between 1774 and 1824. She is regarded as a mystic in the Catholic tradition. She described scenes related to the crucifixion of Jesus in such detail that even the Bible doesn't present them in that way. These visions didn't just describe events. They captured the emotions, the pain, the atmosphere, everything in such detail that it felt like someone was witnessing those moments with their own eyes. There were many things historians had never even recorded. Gibson later said that he came across this book almost by chance, but he took it as a sign. Around the same time, John Barton joined the project. He was studying theology in Rome back then and worked closely with Gibson for nearly 2 years during the film. And he was present on set daily and even helped in post-production. Later, he wrote a book called Inside the Passion because he felt that amid all the discussions around the film, the real story was getting lost. The film was shot in Matera and Cinecittà Studios. These locations looked so authentic that they naturally created the atmosphere of first-century Jerusalem. Even today, if you visit, you can still feel the same old stone streets, the same light, the same same heat. It all feels unchanged. The shooting was far from easy. The actors and the entire crew had to work in temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, wearing heavy traditional costumes and moving across rough terrain. Conditions were so tough that every day felt like a challenge. But maybe that's exactly why every scene in the film turned out so real and powerful. Before shooting began each day, there was a very different kind of atmosphere on set, as the entire team would gather and pray in Latin, and Mel Gibson himself never missed it. Slowly, it became clear that this wasn't just a film shoot. Something much deeper was happening on that set. Gibson saw this project not just as cinema, but as a kind of sacred work, and every scene was crafted with that mindset. This is where the real twist begins. When Gibson told Joe Rogan that people misunderstood the Passion of the Christ, he wasn't just saying it casually. He was absolutely right. The biggest misunderstanding was that people remember the film only for its violence. But in reality, violence was never the purpose. It was just a method, a language. According to Gibson, the extreme brutality shown in the film wasn't meant to shock or scare the audience, and it was an attempt to show something that is very hard to explain in words, even in the language of the Bible. One question kept circling in his mind. What was the true cost of all this? He even said in an interview that this film works directly on your emotions. It takes you to a place where you can feel things deeply, even if you can't fully understand them. The pain shown on screen is not just punishment or torture. In Gibson's view, it's a visual representation of what sin does inside a human being. Every wound, every strike, every cut, it doesn't just show the cruelty of soldiers, but the weight of human weakness built up over time. John Bartneck explained it in very simple words. The violence you're seeing, that's actually what sin looks like from the inside. It breaks a person from within. It distorts their true identity. It changes something beautiful so much that it becomes hard to even recognize. But most people saw this film as just a violent or warlike movie, while in reality, they were witnessing something completely different. If you're finding this story interesting, too, make sure to like the video. It helps us keep uncovering hidden layers like this. Now, let's talk about the second layer, the one hidden behind the violence, because Mel Gibson didn't limit himself to just one message. He made the Passion of the Christ almost like a religious document, but surprisingly, most people never saw it that way. Take a look at the character of Satan. Throughout the film, he doesn't appear like a terrifying monster. Instead, he has a strange calmness, almost beautiful, yet slightly unsettling, a presence portrayed by Rosalinda Celentano. No horns, in no frightening form, just a quiet figure watching everything. This wasn't random. Gibson designed it very intentionally. According to him, evil is rarely openly terrifying. It often looks good, attractive, calm, intelligent, sometimes even loving. The real danger isn't on the outside. It's hidden within. Then comes during the scourging sequence. For a brief moment, Satan is seen holding a strange-looking baby. That child doesn't look normal. Its face is distorted, unsettling, something hard to even describe in words. The scene lasts only a few seconds, and then the film goes back to the painful sequence. People were shocked. Some called it strange, others even thought it was a mistake in direction, but it wasn't a mistake at all. According to John Bartneck, this scene was created deliberately. It's an inverted image of the classic mother and child depiction often seen in Christian art, where a mother lovingly holds her child. Here, Gibson flips that image. The distorted child in Satan's arms becomes a symbol of evil itself. It shows how evil twists and corrupts goodness into something disturbing and unrecognizable. Even the way the child touches Satan's face is like a reverse form of affection, where instead of warmth, you feel something deeply unsettling. That means every small scene was trying to say something. The only difference is most people didn't catch it. And what's even more important is that this disturbing image appears at the exact moment when Jesus Christ is enduring the greatest suffering. That's not a coincidence. In that single moment, it's almost as if Satan is revealing his move right in front of the sacrifice that is meant to defeat him. The interesting thing is that Mel Gibson included this scene in the film, but never really talked about it openly. For nearly 20 years, it just stayed there, almost like it was waiting for someone to truly understand it. And if you look a little deeper, another layer starts to appear. Throughout the Passion of the Christ, where Satan stands in each scene actually matters a lot. Gibson had given clear instructions about this to John Bartneck. In every major scene, whether it's the arrest, the beating, the courtroom-like moments, or the crucifixion, Satan never stands in the front. He's always in the background, just present, watching, moving along, but never becoming the main focus. And this wasn't just simple direction, it was a deliberate idea. According to Gibson, evil doesn't work by coming directly in front. It influences from behind, quietly shaping things. The cruelty we see on screen is human, but the force behind it is something else entirely. That force is never fully visible. It just lingers, subtly present, always active. But what do most people do? They get so absorbed in what's happening in front that they completely miss that silent presence in the background. And that's what really hits, because the film's biggest idea was hidden right there, in the camera positioning, in the framing. But people didn't couldn't catch it. Everything was right in front of them, yet its meaning went unnoticed. Now think about the language. Almost every Hollywood studio told Gibson the same thing. Don't make this film in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew. No one will watch it. No one will understand it. Gibson himself has said he heard this so many times that it became a common opinion. He even said back then, this film is about something people don't even want to touch. The film was shot in languages that are nearly extinct, and everyone believed it wouldn't work. But this time, the numbers proved them wrong. The film uses 3 ancient languages, Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew. But the real point goes beyond that. What Mel Gibson understood, and most people missed, is that this choice wasn't just about making things look real. It was a deeply thought-out spiritual decision. When you don't understand the words being spoken on screen, your focus naturally shifts. You stop following the dialogue and start reading faces. And you notice every movement of the body. And instead of just understanding the story, you begin to feel it. That's exactly what Gibson wanted. That the Passion of the Christ shouldn't feel like a story you've heard, but something you're actually experiencing. He intentionally made a familiar story feel unfamiliar, so it would feel present, new, uncomfortable, and directly impactful. By removing the language barrier, he also removed the comfort zone, where people already know what's going to happen next. Those who had heard this story many times in church, in school, or in plays could no longer rely on that familiarity. They were placed right inside the story without any support. They were no longer just viewers, they became witnesses. And honestly, no major Hollywood studio would normally agree to a decision like this. And that's probably why Gibson financed the entire film himself, around $30 million from his own pocket, without any external support. Now, here's another interesting detail, one that made many people think. During or shortly after the film, several members of the cast and crew converted to Catholicism. Luca Leonello, who played Judas, came to the set as an atheist, but by the time the shoot ended, he had become a Catholic. And then there's Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus Christ. During filming, several strange and dangerous incidents happened to him. At one point, he was struck by lightning, and another crew member, Jan Michelini, experienced it twice. Because of this, he even got the nickname Lightning Boy in the credits. Not just that, while carrying the cross, Caviezel's shoulder got dislocated. He suffered from hypothermia and skin infections. The shoot was physically extremely demanding for him. Later, he said that all these experiences completely changed the way he looked at faith and religion. As for Mel Gibson, he never presented these incidents as miracles or divine signs. He simply described them as they happened and left the interpretation up to people. On this whole topic, there was a long discussion between Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson, and one of the most interesting things was Rogan's own reaction. Rogan considers himself agnostic, meaning he neither fully believes nor completely denies. He grew up in a Catholic environment, but over time, he began questioning organized religion. He has never hidden that. During the conversation, he agreed with Gibson on one point, that in today's secular world, Christianity might be the only religion that is considered safe to openly criticize. He also said that many people in Hollywood call themselves open-minded and spiritual. But when it comes to Christianity, those same people start seeing it as outdated or irrelevant. Some even link it to ideas like white male colonialism, even if the meaning isn't always clearly understood. But the real turning point came when the discussion moved away from the supernatural and toward history. Gibson said that he sees the Gospels not just as religious stories, but as a kind of historical record. Not metaphor, not fiction, but an account of real events. He pointed out that Jesus Christ is mentioned not only in the Bible, but also in other historical sources, like the writings of Tacitus, Josephus, and Pliny the Younger. So, the discussion isn't limited to faith alone. There are historical references as well. Then Gibson said something that completely shifted the tone. He pointed out that every one of Jesus's disciples chose death, rather than turning away from their belief. Not one of them said, "We made this up," or "This was all a lie." And that raises a powerful question. If it wasn't true, would anyone really give their life for something they knew was a made-up story? At that moment, Joe Rogan went quiet for a few seconds, because this wasn't just a religious argument. It was a direct challenge to logic. Someone like Rogan, who comes from a fight sports background and tends to look at things from a practical perspective, actually paused on this point. Because this wasn't about religion anymore. It was about human behavior. Simply put, no one willingly dies for something they believe is a lie. Mel Gibson made the same point. He said, believing in something like the resurrection is the hardest part. It requires the most faith. But he also added that the behavior of those who were closest to the event, the ones who were actually there, acts like a kind of evidence. They had everything to lose and nothing clearly to gain, and still, they didn't walk away from their belief. This is exactly what takes the debate out of religion and into the space of human psychology. And that's something people like Joe Rogan understand very well. Now, let's come to the real revelation that Mel Gibson made in that conversation, something many people still haven't fully grasped. According to him, and the Passion of the Christ was never just about what the Roman soldiers did, what the Jewish authorities decided, or what happened to a man named Jesus Christ. All of that is just the surface story, the part you see on screen. So what is the film really about? It's about us. Gibson clearly said that this story was meant to show that all of us are responsible for this entire event. His sacrifice wasn't just for the people of that time. It was for all humanity, for our weaknesses, our mistakes, and that part of human nature that keeps falling again and again. That means the characters in the film are not just people from history. The deeper idea is that they represent us. This idea connects to a major concept in Christianity, the doctrine of atonement. As it's not a small or isolated idea, it's something that has been taught by different churches for centuries, that the sacrifice of Jesus wasn't the result of just one event, but was tied to the entire burden of human wrongdoing. And Gibson didn't just say this idea, he also hid it inside the film. In the crucifixion scene, the Roman soldier driving the nail is not clearly shown. His face is invisible. He's anonymous, without identity. Why? Because he isn't just one person. He represents all of us. And here comes the most surprising part. The hands shown driving the nail in that scene, they don't belong to anyone else. They are actually Mel Gibson's own hands, his own hand, his own hammer. He intentionally placed himself in that frame. Later, in interviews, and he even explained it, this was a kind of personal confession for him, as if he was saying, I'm part of this too. What's interesting is that even some scholars of Bible-based films, who criticize the movie in many ways, have acknowledged that this decision was theologically deep and accurate. A director placing himself in the most crucial act of violence in his own film. This wasn't just a creative choice, but something very personal and carefully thought out. But it's also important to be clear about one thing. The criticisms of the Passion of the Christ included some serious concerns. Scholars connected to institutions like the Jewish Theological Seminary and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops raised questions about how Jewish authorities were portrayed in the film. Even before the release, the Anti-Defamation League had expressed its objections. Its director at the time, Abraham Foxman, described the film as something that could promote anti-Jewish sentiment. Gibson responded from his side. He said the film also shows several Jewish characters supporting Jesus, and that the cruelty depicted isn't limited to just one group. That's one perspective, but the truth is, the controversy never fully went away. And maybe that's the biggest point of all. This entire controversy became so large that the depth hidden inside the film, its symbols, its visual language, all of it got pushed aside. People stayed busy arguing, and the real message slowly got buried. Now, let's talk about what Mel Gibson shared next in his conversation with Joe Rogan, something many people are still trying to fully understand. The next film he's working on, The Resurrection of the Christ, is not a straightforward part 2. According to Gibson, the story is much bigger. It's not just about what happens next, but about an entire spiritual journey. It begins with the fall of angels, then moves through the world after death, what he refers to as Sheol, and continues all the way to the resurrection. And it doesn't stop there, it goes further, reaching up to the death of the last apostle. That means the story starts from the first rebellion in heaven and stretches all the way to the end of the apostolic age. In simple terms, this isn't going to be a normal film. It's an attempt to show an entire spiritual history, something unusual, something different, and maybe something never seen on screen like this before. Mel Gibson even told Joe Rogan, I've never read anything like this before. Mel Gibson even told Joe Rogan, I've never read anything like this before. This isn't a rushed idea. He has been working on the script for years with his brother Donald Gibson and Randall Wallace. Though around 6 drafts have already been completed, and the project has been in development since at least 2016. The way Gibson describes this film, the story won't move in a straight line. It will shift across different realms. It will have a unique vision of hell, and the overall scale will be massive. It's clear this won't be an ordinary sequel. Honestly, it's the kind of project most big studios would hesitate to approve, which is exactly why the first film was made outside the system as well. Jim Caviezel may return as Jesus Christ, but since nearly 20 years have passed, digital de-aging technology might be needed to match his earlier appearance. Gibson has also said that he hopes to begin shooting in 2026. And here's something unusual. While he was sitting in Austin talking to Rogan, his Malibu home was destroyed in a fire in Los Angeles. He received that news during the interview itself, but he didn't stop the conversation. So the question is, what does all of this really mean? One perspective says that Gibson is simply a deeply religious filmmaker who created his film based on his beliefs. But the deeper decisions behind it were overlooked because the surrounding controversy became too big. Another perspective, discussed by some theologians and film scholars, is that The Passion of the Christ might be one of the most profound and ambitious religious films of the modern era. It wasn't made just as a movie, but almost like a form of meditation, something that works on multiple levels at once. But those who watch it only as a film end up missing a large part of what it's really trying to do. A third perspective, one that comes through in Mel Gibson's own words, is a bit different. According to him, this film wasn't just his idea. Finding the writings of and Catherine Emmerich, the strange incidents on set, set, some actors suddenly converting, and a film rejected by every studio becoming one of the biggest independent hits in history. All of this doesn't neatly fit into a simple coincidence story. Gibson doesn't claim that all of this is the result of a miracle, but he doesn't completely deny it either. He simply puts everything on the table and leaves the judgment to the listener. And maybe that's the most honest part of this whole story. No pressure, just questions. And the answers are for you to find. The truth is, the conversation between Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson didn't have such a massive impact because Gibson said something completely new or unheard of. The ideas he talked about already exist in theology. Books have been written about them. Research has been done. So why did those clips spread so quickly? Because the difference wasn't in what was being said. It was in who was listening. Rogan isn't a religious spokesperson. He wasn't there to promote any faith. He's someone who questions everything, whether it's science, politics, or long-held beliefs. And when a person like that sits there and genuinely says, "I've never thought about it this way before," it stops being just a sentence. It becomes a feeling. And the listeners feel it too. In the end, the thing that leaves the deepest impact is emotion. Rogan himself said that the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is one of the most powerful stories in human history, whether you see it as religious or not. A man who could have saved himself but chose not to. He endured suffering for reasons that even people of that time didn't fully understand. That's the kind of story that touches something deep inside a person, something older than religion itself. In that conversation, Gibson made one more thing clear, that the Passion of the Christ was never meant to be religious propaganda. It wasn't about spreading a church message. It was a personal journey, a man looking inside himself, admitting that maybe he, too, plays a part in the suffering of this world, and then asking a question, can forgiveness really exist? He created one of the most successful religious films in the world, yet placed a small moment in it where his own hand is holding the hammer and driving the nail. For 20 years, people kept watching the blood on screen, but ignored that hand. Joe Rogan noticed it, and that's where the real question begins. This isn't a question of history. It's not a debate about what happened or how it happened. It's not even a religious argument. It's a simpler question, and maybe a deeper one. The same question Gibson himself has been thinking about for years. If you were there at that moment, standing outside the city walls that afternoon, watching it all happen, what would you have done?